Okay, so get ready for this one, folks, because we're going to deep dive into a story that's both heartbreaking and complex.
Yeah.
The headline that really caught our attention today is shocking.
Oh, yeah.
Jealous woman beat boyfriend's child to death. Told police she possibly hugged the boy too strong.
Whoa, that's a headline that really kind of stops you in your tracks.
Absolutely.
It really does speak to the dark side of human emotion, doesn't it?
It does. So we're going to be unpacking a news article that details this really tragic case out of Macomb County, Michigan,
Okay.
back in 2015.
Uh,
It involves a woman named Hillary Ulp, who was convicted for the abuse and subsequent death of her boyfriend's 14-month-old son, Nicholas Kouros.
Tragic on so many levels.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about the initial incident?
Well, the article details just how horrific the abuse was.
Right.
Blunt force trauma to Nicholas's head, a broken collarbone, and multiple broken ribs.
Oh my gosh.
It's difficult to even imagine the pain that poor child endured.
And it's fascinating how in cases of child abuse, the injuries themselves often tell a story.
Yeah.
Those kinds of injuries in a toddler are far beyond what you would expect from a simple fall, as Ulp initially claimed.
Right. She initially tried to explain away those injuries by saying Nicholas might have fallen from the bed.
Wow.
But as the investigation went on, she changed her story, admitting that she possibly hugged him too strong, which may have caused injuries.
That shift in her narrative is significant.
Yeah.
It really suggests an attempt to minimize the severity of her actions, perhaps even to herself.
And the article highlights this really chilling detail.
Oh.
Nicholas's father told police that he believed Ulp was jealous of the attention he gave to his own son.
Wow.
Authorities believe that this jealousy was the driving force behind the abuse.
You know, studies have shown that jealousy often stems from really deep-seated insecurity and fear of abandonment.
Right.
It can trigger this like primal fight or flight response,
Yeah.
hijacking rational thought and leading to impulsive, even violent actions. And it becomes even more tragic when it's directed at someone who can't defend themselves, like a child.
That's a really powerful point.
Yeah.
It's like jealousy warps your reality, making you see threats where they don't exist.
Right.
And in this case, that distorted perception had devastating consequences.
Do we know anything about Ulp's background or mental state that might shed light on her actions?
Unfortunately, the article doesn't really delve too deeply into Ulp's personal history.
Okay.
It primarily focuses on the timeline of the abuse and the legal proceedings that followed.
It would be helpful to understand if there were any pre-existing factors that might have contributed to this level of violence.
Yeah.
But even without that information, the case itself raises some important legal questions. For instance, Ulp was initially convicted of child abuse,
Right.
but then later charged with felony murder after Nicholas tragically passed away.
Right.
Can you explain that for our listener?
Absolutely. So sadly, Nicholas never fully recovered from those initial injuries back in 2015.
Oh.
He died in 2021 at almost 7 years old due to complications from that abuse.
Oh my goodness.
And because of that, Ulp, who was already in prison, was then hit with the felony murder charge.
So felony murder is a complex legal concept.
Yeah.
It doesn't require intent to kill,
Right.
but rather holds someone responsible for a death that occurs during the commission of a felony.
Okay.
In this case, the prosecution successfully argued that Ulp's abuse of Nicholas directly led to his death years later.
And the judge in this case seemed to strongly agree, ultimately sentencing Ulp to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Wow.
It's a powerful statement from the justice system, recognizing the severity of the crime and the long-lasting impact of her actions.
From a legal standpoint, it's a clear message.
Yeah.
Even if the doesn't occur immediately,
Right.
if your actions set that tragic chain of events in motion,
Yeah.
you are held accountable.
The article includes a quote from the prosecutor, Peter Lucido, that really stuck with me. He said, "This case is a heartbreaking reminder of the fragility of life and the devastating consequences of abuse. Our hearts go out to the victim's family, who have endured unimaginable pain and loss over the years. We hope this sentence brings some measure of justice and healing to those who love Nicholas."
That statement really encapsulates the weight of this case, doesn't it?
It does.
It goes beyond simply punishing the perpetrator, acknowledging the ripple effects of violence that extend far beyond the immediate victim.
And it brings up a really crucial point that I think we need to examine further.
Yeah.
The role that jealousy plays, not just in individual acts of violence,
Right.
but in broader societal issues.
Uh-huh.
Because sadly, Ulp's case isn't an isolated incident.
Right.
We've seen similar patterns of jealousy-fueled violence in other cases.
Yeah.
Even ones that don't involve children.
That's an excellent point and a perfect segue into exploring another case mentioned in today's news.
Oh, yeah?
A story about a woman who ended up taking a life
Ooh.
after a seemingly ordinary job interview. It involves a woman returning from a job interview who ended up killing her boyfriend because,
Oh my gosh.
get this, he expressed skepticism about her chances of getting the job.
Wait, he doubted her abilities,
Yeah.
and she reacted by killing him.
Yeah.
That seems like an extreme overreaction, even if jealousy was involved.
It certainly does, and it's a stark reminder that these cases are never simple, often involving a complex web of emotions, past experiences, and personal dynamics.
You're right.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder that sometimes the smallest triggers,
Right.
like a seemingly harmless comment, can ignite a powder keg of emotion.
Yeah,
Especially when jealousy is already simmering beneath the surface.
you're right. It's like that old saying, jealousy is a green-eyed monster
Oh, yeah.
that can consume a person, twisting their thoughts and actions.
That's a perfect analogy, and it's not just limited to romantic relationships either.
Right.
Think about sibling rivalry competition among coworkers, even envy between friends.
Yeah.
Jealousy can rear its ugly head in all sorts of situations. Absolutely. What's fascinating to me is that jealousy often stems from a place of insecurity and a lack of self-worth.
Right.
It's almost like people who are confident and secure in themselves are less likely to be consumed by those feelings.
That's a really insightful observation.
Yeah.
It's not just about the external threat,
Yeah.
but also about the internal struggle someone might be facing.
So it's a double-edged sword. The external trigger might be what sets it off,
Right.
but the internal vulnerabilities are what fuel the fire.
Right.
This makes you wonder, how can we apply this understanding to prevent these kinds of tragedies?
Well, for starters, we need to foster environments where open communication and emotional intelligence are valued.
Okay.
If people feel comfortable expressing their feelings,
Right.
especially those rooted in insecurity or fear,
Yeah.
they're less likely to let those emotions fester and turn into something destructive.
Creating a space where people can talk about their insecurities without judgment
Yeah.
could be incredibly powerful.
Yeah. It could also be helpful to teach people how to recognize the early warning signs of jealousy in themselves and others.
Okay.
Things like possessiveness, constant comparisons, attempts to control or isolate someone. These can all be red flags.
So it's about being aware of those patterns,
Right.
both in our own behavior and in the behavior of those around us.
Exactly.
And if we see something, we should say something right.
Exactly. Early intervention is key.
Okay.
If we can address those feelings of jealousy before they escalate,
Yeah.
we might be able to prevent them from spiraling out of control.
Now, in addition to the cases we've discussed, there's another news story today that, while not directly related to jealousy, raises important questions about parental responsibility and the well-being of children.
Oh, really?
It's the tragic story of a mother who used a hairdryer to warm her infant, leading to the baby's death.
That headline is just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It's a stark reminder of how quickly things can go wrong, especially when dealing with the fragility of an infant.
The article states that the mother claims she was trying to warm her baby using the hairdryer. But tragically, she passed out, leaving the infant exposed to the heat for an extended period.
This is where the conversation about support systems becomes so important.
Right.
Parenting, especially with a newborn, can be incredibly demanding both physically and emotionally.
Absolutely.
Sleep deprivation, stress, and a lack of support can impair judgment and create dangerous situations.
It's easy to judge from the outside,
Right.
but we need to remember that every parent is navigating their own set of challenges.
And while this case is still under investigation, it does bring up a crucial point
Yeah.
that goes beyond this particular tragedy.
Okay.
The importance of providing resources and education to new parents, not just about basic childcare, but also about self-care and recognizing when they need to reach out for help.
It's a reminder that sometimes the smallest actions can have devastating consequences,
Right.
and that preventing these tragedies requires a collective effort from families, communities, and society as a whole.
Speaking of communities and the unexpected events that can shake them,
Yeah.
there's another story that caught my eye today.
Oh, yeah?
It's about a man who made a shocking discovery in his own home.
What was that?
The body of his deceased brother.
Wait, he found his brother's body in his house?
Yes, and the circumstances surrounding the discovery are quite peculiar.
Okay.
According to the article, the man was completely oblivious to his brother's death,
Really?
even though the body had been in his home for a significant amount of time.
He had no idea his own brother was dead in his house. How is that even possible?
That's what makes this story so bizarre.
Yeah.
Apparently, the brother's body was found with a hatchet still in his head.
Oh my gosh.
Yet the man claimed to have no knowledge of what had transpired.
A hatchet in the head.
Yeah,
This is definitely taking a dark turn.
yeah.
Do we know anything about their relationship or any possible motive?
Unfortunately, the article doesn't delve into those details.
Okay.
It focuses primarily on the shocking nature of the discovery and the ongoing investigation. However, this does raise some interesting questions.
Yeah.
About family dynamics, secrets, and the lengths people will go to maintain a facade of normalcy.
You're right. It makes you wonder what could have happened behind closed doors that led to such a horrific end.
Right.
And how could someone be so unaware of what was happening in their own home?
Yeah.
It's a reminder that there are always layers beneath the surface, even in the lives of those closest to us.
And it speaks to the human capacity for denial, compartmentalization, and the ways we cope with trauma and loss.
Yeah.
Sometimes the truth is too difficult to confront head on, leading to a disconnect from reality that can have profound consequences.
That's a powerful point, it seems like, in each of these cases.
Yeah.
Whether it's driven by jealousy, negligence, or some other underlying factor,
Right.
there's a common thread of avoidance,
Uh-huh.
a failure to acknowledge and address difficult emotions or situations until it's too late.
It's like we build these walls around ourselves thinking we can keep the darkness at bay, but eventually those walls crumble, and the consequences can be devastating.
You've hit on something really profound here.
Yeah.
It's like these cases, as different as they are on the surface, all point to this underlying human tendency to avoid difficult truths.
And it makes you wonder, what can we do to break down those walls?
Yeah.
To create a world where people feel safe enough to confront their emotions, to ask for help, to intervene when they see something wrong.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
We've explored the dark side of jealousy, the fragility of life, the complexities of family relationships,
Right.
but where do we go from here?
Well, I think it starts with awareness.
Okay.
We need to be aware of the warning signs, the red flags that might indicate someone is struggling,
Yeah.
whether it's with jealousy, anger, or any other difficult emotion.
And we need to be aware of the resources available in our communities.
Right.
The support system that can help individuals and families navigate those challenges.
Exactly. We need to move beyond judgment and create a culture of empathy and understanding. If someone reaches out for help, let's meet them with compassion and guidance, not shame or stigma.
It's also about recognizing that we all have a role to play in creating a safer and more supportive society.
Right.
If we see something that seems off, let's not be afraid to speak up.
You're absolutely right. It's about having the courage to step outside of our comfort zones and intervene when necessary.
Yeah.
It might be uncomfortable, but it could make a world of difference in someone's life.
And sometimes it's the smallest actions that can have the greatest impact.
Yeah.
A simple act of kindness, a listening ear, a willingness to connect on a human level. These things can go a long way in preventing tragedies and fostering a more compassionate world.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Okay.
I want to leave our listener with a final thought.
Okay.
It's a question to ponder, a call to action.
Right.
What can you do today in your own life to make a difference?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a grand gesture. It could be as simple as checking in on a friend, offering a helping hand to a neighbor, or just being a little more present and aware of the people around you.
Beautifully said. Sometimes the most profound changes start with the smallest steps.
And remember, knowledge is power.
Yes.
The more we understand about these complex issues, the better equipped we are to navigate them and create positive change.
Thank you for joining us on this journey today. It's been heavy at times, but ultimately I think it's through these difficult conversations that we can start to create a brighter future for all.